Priority alarm. A Xenos invasion force has been detected on the Forge world, Graia. Specifically, the forces converging on Manufactorum Ajacis. Forge worlds, and subsequently the Manufactorums, are run by the Adeptus Mechanicus, and the industrial output of their Manufactorums include everything from something harmless like farming equipment to arms and armament for the forces of the Imperium of Mankind, such as bolters, support sentinels, and battle tanks. Manufactorum Ajacis also houses a few of the Imperium's most feared weapons, the Warlord-class Titan. Technological marvels of unparalleled destruction that can take multiple generations to construct. Graia, being home to a weapon of such import, means exterminatus of the planet to eliminate the Xenos threat is not an option. Capital weaponry is also not an option. Bombing the planet's surface from orbit would grievously cripple the Manufactorum's operations. Mobilizing a liberation fleet could take anywhere from a week to an entire month, and such a delay would be unacceptable. A swift surgical strike is what's needed here. We need the Ultramarines. We pick up aboard a strike cruiser in the Ultramarines fleet.
Captain Titus, the Orcs have massacred the Forge World's forces.
And now we know what variety of Xenos filth we're dealing with. The Orcs. Sickly green, staggeringly numerous, and as dangerous as they are annoying. The invasion has been ongoing for over 9 days at this point, and the Orcs have settled in, shredding Imperium forces on land and sabotaging the planetary defenses in order to lock down the skies. The Orcs are undoubtedly after the Titans, and they must not be allowed to succeed. Defensive batteries on the surface are rocking the cruiser, which means a safe landing isn't an option. Captain Titus, his right hand veteran Sergeant Sidonus, and new recruit Private Leandros head down ahead of the rest of the squad. Navigating a torrent of destroyed ships and anti-aircraft fire, Captain Titus spies the biggest gun aboard the biggest Orc warship and decides to do something about it. Once the good captain touches down, he makes short work of the Orc forces as he carves a path straight towards the stern of the ship where the gun battery is. When he gets close, the Orc warboss makes an appearance.
Get off my ship, Space Marine!
Captain Titus ignores this as he redirects the ship's gun placement to fire on the ship itself, pretty much destroying it, and sending the ship careening towards the planet's surface. Amidst the smoldering wreckage, Captain Titus emerges, ready to get to work. Sergeant Sidonus radios in.
Captain Titus, come in. Damned Orcs shot me off course. I've had no word from Leandros, but I'm picking up Vox chatter from Imperial Guard forces on the ground.
I scarcely thought anyone would be left alive, much less still fighting.
Heading towards the front lines now.
I will meet you there.
A true testament to the unyielding tenacity of the Astra Militarum, the Guard stands strong even in the face of insurmountable odds. Captain Titus heads toward the sound of battle, aiming to rendezvous with his squad. Private Leandros is found in the remains of an old cathedral, holding strong against the green tide. Once the Orcs are repelled, Leandros makes it clear that he doesn't appreciate the captain's looser interpretation of the Codex Astartes.
The Codex Astartes warns against using jump packs to leap blindly into enemy fire, and for good reason.
Your days as a novice are behind you. Why do you still interpret the Codex so narrowly?
I look to its rules for guidance.
We all do. But there are also benefits to thinking for yourself, Leandros.
With that brief moment of respite over, Titus and Leandros continue towards the planetary gun battery, keen on figuring out how the Guard managed to survive all this time. A short time later, the pair come across a small group of guardsmen holding the line against an Orc assault and lend a hand.
You have saved us. Rise, guardsmen. You saved yourselves. We thought you did.
One guardsman swears it's thanks to their lieutenant that they've managed to survive this long, and then directs Titus and Leandros towards the command bunker where the lieutenant currently is. Leandros spots Sergeant Sidonus giving the Orcs hell, and now the trio are reunited.
Sergeant, I found something to keep you busy.
Worry not, Captain. I've saved some orcs for you.
And not a moment too soon, because here come more greenskins. The captain and his boys shoot and slash their way through rubble and trenches and eventually group up with some guardsmen dug in at the entrance to the command bunker. One of the guardsmen says the door to the bunker is sealed. Titus essentially says, "We are Ultramarines." The guardsmen say, "Fair enough," and they open the door.
Thank the Emperor. Second Lieutenant Mira, 203rd Cadian Regiment.
Captain Titus of the Ultramarines.
You are in command.
I'm all that's left, my lord. Unless my commanders rise from the grave. So far, they seem content to stay put.
Lieutenant, the scouts have returned to forward base.
How many?
2.
Damn. I sent out 10.
Lieutenant Mira makes it clear that the Guard will continue to struggle as long as the planetary gun battery that the Orcs captured remains operational. Titus takes this time to ask what Lieutenant Mira knows of the Titans that they're there to secure, and she says some troops were sent to guard the Titan Invictus at Manufactorum Ajax back when the invasion first began, but there's been no word from those troops for 2 weeks. Mira sets out with Titus and co. in order to guide them to the western gates of the Manufactorum, while explaining that the gun battery took out most of the arriving Militarum troops at the start of the invasion, and pretty much every Imperial support ship that's tried to land on the surface. Never has there been an easier problem for a handful of Space Marines to solve. Mira heads back to the command bunker while Titus and his boys press on, putting soda can-sized holes and gaping flesh wounds in anything green, and eventually the trio makes it to the outer wall of the gun battery fortress. The crew comes across a support pod containing a jump pack, and Leandro suggests Titus use it to dominate the high ground while he and Sidonus deal with the orcs down low. The three proceed to crush the orc defenses and make it inside the gun fortress via the same tunnel the orcs used to enter. Once inside, Sidonus points out that clearing the fortress could take days which the guardsmen do not have, so Titus says their only play is to find a way to destroy the gun battery. In their assault through the halls of the fortress, the crew comes across an armory. Aside from some much needed ammunition, there's a melt-a-charge on the table, a very powerful explosive which Leandros theorizes could be attached to an artillery shell and loaded into the gun battery in order to detonate it from inside.
Leandros, you do the chapter proud.
With the charge in hand, the trio carve their way through shades of green and down towards shell storage. Once there, Titus places the charge on a shell and moves it into its place in the loading assembly. Knowing the orcs may notice something off about the shell, and refusing to leave such an important matter to chance, Titus decides they must follow the shell up and make sure it reaches the gun. The orcs continue to try and dispatch the trio, to no avail, and eventually they reach a secondary loading platform a few floors up where the sabotaged shell has, of course, been pulled out of sequence. Leandros opts to reload the shell while Titus and Sidonus defend him, and, once the shell's back in place, Sidonus suggests that they be somewhere else once the charge detonates. That's a job well done.
Captain Titus, you are a man of your word, my lord. Thank you.
Back on task, our Marines head for their objective, the Titan Manufactorum. Titus, Leandros, and Sidonus arrive at the entrance to a mighty bridge that serves as a transport railway. The bridge is a straight shot to the Manufactorum, and the orcs must know this as well because Sidonus notices a railcar that's been crudely repurposed as a battering ram positioned on the tracks on the opposite side of the terminal. A ram it may be, but it can also serve as transportation to the Manufactorum, so once the area is clear of orcs, the trio is able to board the ram in the nick of time. Pushing forward, the boys in blue rid the transport of anything green and moving, gradually reaching the front until they become pinned down by an orc-manned plasma turret. Sidonus and Leandros draw its fire while Titus seizes control of the turret just in time for an orc gunship to enter the fray. Once the gunship is dealt with, it dive bombs the transport, derailing the entire thing. Right outside the western gates of the Manufactorum. Manufactorum Ajacis still holds, and the Imperial Guard units are not all dead, somehow still withstanding the Orc assault on the facility. Titus, Sidonus, and Leandros head down out of the rubble and towards the Manufactorum, but they're met with a servo skull, marked with the seal of the Inquisition, attempting to deliver a message to any living member of the Imperium of Man, which it seems to have a hard time finding. The servo scans Captain Titus and begins message playback.
This is Inquisitor Drogan. I need urgent assistance at Manufactorum Ajacis. They're after the experimental device. The device is safe for the time being. I've drawn them off. But now I'm trapped. If I die, you must keep the device out of enemy hands, or he'll be unstoppable.
The Inquisition are the secret police force and primary intelligence service of the Imperium, so any secret belonging to the secret police is definitely not something anyone outside the Imperium should have, especially the Orcs. Titus and company proceed through the outer perimeter of the Manufactorum, and Private Leandros notices the Orcs have co-opted a loading crane carrying a jerry-rigged plasma cannon, which the Orcs plan to use to blow open the inner Manufactorum. Titus and the boys work their way through the green tide and eventually up into the crane control room, where Titus uses the controls to drop the cannon onto the main Orc encampment right below. Corporal Antioch, who saw what happened, radios into the control room.
Number 2 control deck, do you read?
This is Captain Titus of the Ultramarines. Identify yourself.
This is Corporal Antioch, sir. That is, my lord.
I need access to the Manufactorum, Corporal.
There is a service lift in the hangar directly below where you drop the cargo, my lord. We can meet you there.
Stand ready. We will be there shortly.
The Orcs know something's up now, if the exploding plasma cannon was any indication, so the Blue Man group is met with plenty of opposition on their way to the hangar. Once inside, yet another horde of Orcs is eager to cease being alive, as the greenskins start pouring out of every available entrance to the hangar. After the coast is clear, Corporal Antioch and his group arrive from below via the hangar lift.
Corporal Antioch?
Yes, my lord.
We have word that an Inquisitor is in the Manufactorum.
Yes, Lord Drogan. We have not seen him for several days.
Before long, Titus and co. reach the access point to the Manufactorum proper. On their way up in the access lift, the crew is met with quite the sight.
The Titan Invictus seems undamaged at least.
Titan Invictus seems unused, you mean? Is this invasion not enough to bring out the War Titans?
It takes hundreds to get a War Titan operational, Sergeant. Without them, it sits idle.
Now that the Titan is confirmed unassailed by green hands, there is time to look for Inquisitor Drogan and this experimental weapon he's safeguarding. Leandros spies an auger station in the room, which he uses to scan for life signs in the facility. The good news is, the system confirms that the Inquisitor is in this wing of the Manufactorum. The bad news is, the scan also picked up a large number of alien life signs which are converging on the Inquisitor's position. Time is of the essence. Our trio continues on, and Titus spots a facility communications panel, which Leandros can engineer to boost communications range and contact the rest of the boys in blue.
Here, Captain.
Ultramarines, this is Captain Titus. Are you receiving?
Captain, this is Sergeant Midas. Squad Solidus is on the ground and making for our objective.
New orders, Midas. We are at Manufactorum Ajacis and have located the Titan Invictus. I need Solinus to come secure the Invictus while I divert to a priority alarm.
On our way, Captain. Midas out.
Now, the Titan will be protected from anything green while Titus and the boys locate Inquisitor Drogan. And not a moment too soon, because here come the Orcs, using the pipework to gain entry into the facility. A testament to Orc intelligence, it took them 2 weeks to figure out that was an option. Once the nearby Orcs are no longer nearby, our trio finds the wounded Inquisitor trying to pack up and get out.
Inquisitor Drogan?
I am Drogan. And you are?
Captain Titus of the Ultramarines. We received your distress call, but you seem to have weathered the enemy's attack.
I am soldier and scientist, both, Captain.
What is the status of the experimental device?
The power source is running the entire Manufactorum from the generator room.
This device is a fuel source, not a weapon?
It is a complex device and an unstable one. If the Orcs find it, they'll try and take it apart. It could detonate with enough force to destroy the entire planet.
Then we must move it to safety.
The gang doesn't make it far before they're met by someone I'm sure they forgot about.
Space Marine! You trying to steal my Titans? Steal my loot? I'll rip your guts right out your throat!
The Orc war boss has a scent for them now, which might make the retrieval of the weapon's power source a bit more challenging. Right when the initial assault is thought to be over, an Orc shaman makes himself known and summons reinforcements. Unfortunately for him, magic can't stop a bolter round to the cranium, so once they're dead, Titus and the gang take a lift far down below, deep into the facility where the power source of the weapon lies. Inquisitor Drogon instructs Captain Titus to enter the chamber, alone, with Sidonus and Leandros standing guard at the chamber access points, keeping an eye out for trouble. As you'd expect, trouble found Titus in the form of the Orc war boss and another Orc shaman, both inviting reinforcements to the party. Titus successfully holds off the Orcs while the power source extraction is underway, but when Titus reaches to grab it and go, a massive backlash of energy causes the chamber to collapse, separating Titus from the rest of the party.
Sidonus, Leandros, respond.
Captain, the Inquisitor insisted you could not have survived.
Well, I did, and I have his precious power source.
We set a rendezvous in Hab Center Andris. These tunnels will spit us out there eventually.
Titus marches through a maze of sewer tunnels, alone, for what seems like hours, remaining on guard in case some Orcs want to disturb his quiet time. As anyone would expect, Orcs do come for him, a few times in fact, and he stands fast against them all. After a lengthy jaunt through the sewage and greenskins, Titus boards a lift and emerges at the main floor of the facility, where he continues to make his way towards the rendezvous. Before long, he's met with the sound of Sidonus and Leandros taking it to the Orcs as well.
Captain Titus.
Well met, brothers. Any idea of our position?
We should be nearing an access point to the surface. The air smells a bit cleaner.
I've had enough of tunnels. Let's get out of here and find the Inquisitor before the Orcs do.
With the trio reunited, they fight their way to the outside, only to look up and see a downpour of Orc drop pods.
Millions more of them.
Our plan is unchanged.
A more present concern, Orc rocket launches take to the high ground in the area ahead and start launching rockets. Titus, Leandros, and Sidonus weather the assault, marching a bloody path through the collapsed remnants of buildings, erasing Orcs everywhere they're spotted, up high or down low, eventually reaching an intact monument standing tall in the town square, with Inquisitor Drogon present at its base.
Inquisitor Drogon, we need to get you off planet before we're overrun by Orcs.
You were exposed to the unshielded power source. In the generator room, I saw it. You held raw energy from the warp. How are you still alive?
The power source conducts warp energies.
The stuff of chaos. Heresy.
My work against the Xenos has the Imperium's blessing.
Can your blessed work help us against the Orcs?
My research is of the utmost secrecy. The Imperium forbids its use without sanction.
Consider that your Imperial sanction.
Very well. The power source fuels an experimental weapon at my research facility. The Psychic Scourge. It could destroy the Orcs.
You didn't think to bring up this Scourge weapon before?
The psychic Scourge has never been test-fired, Sergeant. If it malfunctions, it could crack this planet in half.
We're out of options. We fire the weapon and take our chances.
Sidonus points out they're not far from the site where Lieutenant Mira was headed to establish a supply outpost. Titus suggests they reach the outpost and use the Imperial Valkyries to fly to Research Facility Calcus where Drogon's weapon resides, since there's no time to attempt the journey on foot. Titus and company reach the ruins of a building where some guardsmen are in the midst of an orc assault, and they decide to help wrap that up. Titus notices the Inquisitor is slowing down, most likely due to the wounds he sustained before his rescue. The good captain proposes that, since the orcs are after the power source, Leandros and Sidonus can safely escort Drogon to the Valkyries, while he himself makes some noise and draws the orcs' attention. Making his job easier, Titus happens across an assault pod holding a jump pack and a thunderhammer, and uses it to bring the full might of the Imperium down upon any opposition he happens to encounter. The orcs try their best to get the power source, but Captain Titus is him, so they are ultimately unsuccessful. Once Titus reaches the outpost, Lieutenant Mira meets him at the gate, already briefed on the plan by Sergeant Sidonus, and tells Titus the Valkyrie squadron is ready for takeoff.
Pilots, this is Lieutenant Mira aboard Valkyrie 1. Look sharp, orc flyers inbound.
The orcs just don't know when to quit. Our boys are flying high, headed for Research Facility Calcus, and here comes dozens of orc jetpack lads. Captain Titus mans the heavy bolter in order to help these hostiles quickly become reacquainted with the ground, but not before they pick off a few Valkyries. An orc gunship then rears its ugly mug, and while Titus is able to fend it off, an orc flies into one of the turbines of his Valkyrie, bringing it down. But not before Titus can bail and land, safely, on an orc encampment. Titus radios Lieutenant Mira to let her know he needs a pickup, and since he has time to kill, he keeps busy by mopping up some greenskins. Right as the last enemy falls, Lieutenant Mira arrives to scoop up Titus and finish their trip. The captain rendezvous with Sergeant Sidonus, Private Leandros, and Inquisitor Drogon in the outskirts of the research facility. Drogon is showing signs of irritability, even more than usual.
Where is it?
The device is secure.
What are we waiting for then? Further delay is intolerable.
Inquisitor, are you alright?
Yes. Come. No time to waste.
Our favorite blueberries escort Inquisitor Drogon through dusty terrain, and orcs of course, towards the sluiceways of the research facility where Drogon suggests the number of orcs should be minimal. Weird, considering minimal for orcs might mean a few hundred, but what's that to a warrior of Ultramar? After a long while trudging through sand, Titus and the boys make it to the sluice gate and manage to fend off the orcs long enough for Drogon to get the door open. Drogon claims his plan is to use the orbital spire, essentially a ground-to-space elevator, as a conduit for the energy fired by his experimental weapon, and the psychic wave the backlash releases should neutralize the majority of the orcs. It sounds too good to be true, but Titus knows there are scant few options for a speedy resolution to this conflict, so he continues with the plan. Once the team reaches the pipes and makes it into the facility's sub-basement, Titus asks Drogon what the deal is.
What can we expect inside, Inquisitor?
Oh yes, just a few defenses.
What comprises a few, Inquisitor?
Servo turrets, mostly.
Set to eliminate orcs?
Set to eliminate anything with the misfortune to move within their range.
Right now, anything beats orcs. Drogon says he can shut down the defenses if he can reach the central security room, so that's where the group goes. Once they reach the section of the lab where the security room is located, the way forward is locked off. Drogon attempts to disable the turrets and release the locks on the doors, but apparently that terminal does not recognize the shutdown command for the defenses, so the turrets remain operational. The crew reaches another terminal right outside the base of Drogon's weapon, and Drogon remarks the firing core is still intact. All that needs to be done is to insert the power source that Titus is carrying. The core will then raise to the roof of the facility into the firing array, and then fire at the spire, ending the invasion. Simple enough. After uninstalling some more turrets, Titus and the boys reach the command room where Drogon can finally disable any further defenses and begin the firing sequence for the weapon.
Very good.
All the security measures will be down shortly, Captain. I'm afraid they were the only thing keeping the orcs outside, however.
But you will be able to fire the weapon.
Indeed.
We had better do so quickly. This place will be awash with orcs before long.
And awash they shall be, because the orcs waste no time charging into the generator room. Our Smurfs make short work of the opposition, and Titus inserts the power source into its cradle in the power core.
Very good, Captain. Your time carrying my power source is finally at an end.
Drogon goes to begin the firing sequence, but there seems to be an orc-related issue in the firing chamber. Nothing's ever easy. The Emperor's finest proceed to the firing chamber, clearing the area of those green good old boys, and reconnect the conduit that was dislodged from the firing array. With that done, Titus is instructed to proceed to the main control panel and fire the weapon.
Primary containment fixture disengaging. Firing sequence in progress. Firing now. Alarm.
Look at the spire.
Well, that looks bad. And of course, here he comes.
I've been looking for you, Space Marine. You've got something of mine.
Titus and his brothers brace for battle, but then a wave of psychic energy floors everyone present in the firing chamber. And the orcs appear unaffected.
Why didn't it work?
Damn that Drogon! Never trust the Inquisition!
Stand fast, Ultramarines. We can handle a few orcs.
Space Marine! Was that supposed to hurt?
Demons! How is this possible?
Ah! You got new friends now, Space Marine! Inquisitor! Get back! How heroic! Drogon!
I have served you well, Lord Nemeroth. Traitor.
As the saying goes in the 41st millennium, shit can and will get worse. If you somehow didn't see it coming, Inquisitor Drogon was a traitor to the Imperium, a servant of chaos, this whole time. The figure that emerged from the warp, Lord Nemeroth, absorbs the remaining life force inside Drogon, as well as all his memories and knowledge of what happened so far. Nemeroth boasts to his demon horde, thanks to Drogon's weapon ripping an opening in the fabric separating the material plane and the warp, Nemeroth and some of his demon hordes have the entry point they need in order to enter this reality. Nemeroth also says that the gateway is not yet large enough, which definitely means a much bigger force is waiting to break through as well. In the midst of this revelation, the Orc boss wants to make sure nobody forgot he was there, and he charges Nemeroth. Tall, Dark, and Ugly dances with the War Boss for a bit, and then tries to send the Green Menace over the edge of the platform, but the War Boss takes Nemeroth with him as he falls, so they're both no longer a problem for the time being. Sidonus suggests it's time to go, and the trio are in agreement. They spot some demons on the way to a lift that they can use to descend the tower, while Leandros curses the Inquisitor for sending a false distress call, but Titus says he noticed differently. Titus heard the fear in Drogon's voice during the call, not to mention, Drogon said,
If I die, you must keep the device out of enemy hands, or he'll be unstoppable.
Likely moments away from getting carted off by demons, turned into a living puppet by Nemiroff, and made to orchestrate the arrival of Nemiroff and his forces. Back to the here and now, demons are swinging on blue and green targets alike as Guilliman's Chosen wade through the literal chaos unfolding left and right throughout the facility. Now that Player 2 has entered the game, the path to victory is much cloudier than it was mere minutes ago.
That gate, it's getting bigger. If it gets much larger, Nemiroff can bring his fleet through.
Then we must cut the link between Warp Gate and Tower.
You have a plan.
We use Invictus to sever the orbital spire.
At that range, will the Titan's cannon be effective?
It's time we use the power source to our advantage. To supercharge Invictus, we need to reach that Titan.
The good captain has a good plan, so our trio begins the journey back to Manufactorum Ajakis. The forces of Chaos are in open conflict with the orcs throughout the ruined city, with Chaos Space Marines and traitor guardsmen joining the fray. But the boys in blue aren't about to let them have all the fun. Once clear of the skirmish, our intrepid Marines reach the quiet of some abandoned barracks, and Private Leandros can't keep his concerns bottled up any longer.
Captain, duty requires that I put voice to my concerns.
Speak then.
You held the unshielded power source again, Captain. And again, you emerged from the exposure unscathed.
Leandros cites the rules, asserting that the only possible reason that Captain Titus has survived being exposed to the raw energies of the warp, twice, is because Captain Titus is also a traitor in cahoots with the forces of Chaos. Sergeant Adonis dismisses the ridiculous thought immediately, and neither he nor Titus lend credence to the accusation. Titus says he would also like to know why he can resist the warp, while reminding Leandros that all that can wait, because there's currently 2 invasions that the 3 of them need to find a way to stop. Like a roided out group of neighborhood watch, the trio eliminate all combatants as they make their way through the streets, eventually coming across a few guardsmen who have managed to remain alive in these trying times.
Guardsman, report.
My Lord Space Marine. They were on us almost immediately.
Lieutenant, Space Marines are here. Captain Titus, are you there? This is Lieutenant Mira. This whole planet has gone mad.
The forces of Chaos are invading this world. We must get to the Titan and destroy that warp gate.
I know what route to take. I deployed troops to man outposts between the Calcis facility and Bastion Primus. From there, you can access the rail network and cross to Manufactorum Ajakis.
Understood.
A voice for sore ears, Lieutenant Mira is able to provide much needed support to expedite the Goody Blue Shoes' journey back to Manufactorum Ajakis. A few fights later, the boys reach a lift which takes them down to rendezvous with Lieutenant Mira.
How can we face them? The legions of Chaos.
Trooper, get yourself together right now!
Yes, Mom.
The other platoons are going to fall back towards the Bastion. Hold this position, or they'll be cut off.
Greetings, Ultramarines.
What is your situation, Lieutenant?
As well as can be hoped, considering we are surrounded on all sides by the enemy horde.
We're heading back to the command post, Captain.
The combined threat of the Heretics and the Greenskins provide ample opposition for Titus and Co. to push through, but that's just another day at the office for the Astra Militarum and the Space Marines. On approach to Bastion Primus, where our trio boarded the Valkyries earlier, Imperial Guard forces are being pressed by the Orcs, especially since the Orcs cut power to the Bastion's sentry guns. The sentry guns make up for the scarce number of guardsmen, and our heroes can't stick around to hold the line, so Sidonis, Leandros, and Mira help reinforce the other guardsmen while Titus heads out to restore power to the sentry guns. The Orcs send wave after wave to repel him, but Titus eventually makes it to the generator, and not a moment too soon. With the guns back online, Titus is free to regroup with his brethren who are headed underground via an alternate path to the railway. Heading down to meet up with him, Titus is suddenly yoked up by none other than the Orc Warboss, who just won't give up his obsession with claiming the power source. Orc Warboss Grimskull, as he finally introduces himself, has been a thorn in the side of our boys for far too long, so Titus settles in for a fight. Orcs don't fight fair, so Grimskull periodically busts down the walls of the arena, opening the way for reinforcements to assist him in claiming his bounty. It makes little difference though, as Titus is more than adept enough to keep Grimskull at bay while mopping up the additional annoyances. The battle is hard fought for the war boss, and eventually he relents.
I ain't finished with you yet, Space Marine!
But I am finished with you, Orc.
With their smartest idiot down, the Orcs will be scattered, which should make it relatively easier to deal with them from here on.
Captain! The damned Orc is dead.
Finally, some good news.
With the trio reunited, they board a railcar and take off for Manufactorum Ajakis.
Captain Titus, the Orcs are running scared.
Finally back inside the Manufactorum, Titus and his merry men make their way to Titan Invictus. Before long, the Titan's main operator radios the Ultramarines.
Ultramarines, this is Princeps Enoch aboard Titan Invictus.
This is Captain Titus. What is the status of the Titan?
My crew and I are aboard Invictus, but she's immobilized. You will need to activate our berth's backup generator to release the mooring clamps.
Understood.
The boys in blue come across some Chaos Marines and Traitor Guard putting up a hell of a fight in an attempt to keep our boys from reaching the Titan. To make matters worse, a Chaos Psyker arrives to open a portal for enemy reinforcements. Unfortunately for them, a Chaos Psyker is as bulletproof as an Orc Shaman, so it's readily dispatched. After popping about a dozen more caps and a dozen more asses, the Space Boys make it to the control panel at the foot of Titan Invictus and restore power to its systems. Next up is the control panel for the mooring clamps, and Princeps Enoch warns that it's well guarded by heretics. Naturally, a healthy contingent of Traitor Guard, Chaos Marines, and Chaos Psykers try their best, but ultimately fall like all the rest. Titus directs Sidonus and Leandros to open the Manufactorum gates while he heads up the lift to disable the mooring clamps. Once the Titan is free to get to stepping, Titus directs Enoch to move Titan Invictus into a position where he can board. After he takes care of the Blight drone that just flew in to try and stop him, of course. With the coast clear, Titus takes the final lift up and then hops on board the Titan, just in time to fend off some Chaos Psykers and another Blight drone. Titus drops down the cannon side of the Titan and installs Drogon's power source into one of the cannon's ports. Titus tells Enoch to target the spire and full send it.
Target acquired.
Firing now.
Sire, preserve us.
With the invasion ground to a halt and our trio back together, it's time to move on. On their way down from the Titan, our heroes discuss next steps.
That's done it, Titus.
But Nemeroth and his demon host still roam free.
Though he is trapped on this world.
And all the more desperate to recover the power source. We must get it to safety, my friend.
Sidonus wants to destroy the power source just to be done with it, but there's no telling what kind of catastrophic results that may yield. Since the Inquisition can't be trusted, Titus says he would rather take it to someone trustworthy, like their chapter master back on Macragge, the homeworld of the Ultramarines. For right now, however, Sidonus is instructed to take the power source back to their strike cruiser and seal it in the armory until their work on Graia is done.
What will you be doing while I run this little errand?
There are still thousands of traitors and heretics on this world. I intend to drastically thin their ranks.
Lieutenant Mira's Valkyrie is on its way, Captain.
Excellent. We make for the landing pad. And watch for the Chaos Lord's forces.
On their way to the landing pad, the gang is ambushed by Chaos Marines, so Titus sends Sidonus on ahead while he and Leandros hold them off. Sidonus is having a hell of a time holding his own at the landing pad, and right when Titus and Leandros catch up to him, Lord Nemeroth appears, slays Sidonus, and reclaims the power source.
At last. No!
Such a pretty bauble, hiding such immense power. This device is a gift from the Chaos Gods.
It holds the key to my evolution, to my ascension, to immortal demonhood.
And now we know what Nemiroth's final goal is: to become a true demon. Grief over the loss of Sidonus must quickly be turned into vengeance because a hefty amount of heretics just warped onto the landing pad, no doubt looking to finish off the remaining thorns in Nemiroth's side. Too bad for them it didn't work, because Titus and Leandros systematically eliminate the Psychers, Traitor Guard, and Chaos Marines, gloriously and without mercy. Lieutenant Mira arrives on the scene and is saddened to see the Titus trio is now a duo.
Nemiroth killed Sidonus for the power source. You said the Inquisitor's work was heretical, Leandros. You were right.
What do you mean?
Nemiroth plans to use the power source to trigger his transformation into a demon prince.
Abomination!
How can we stand against such a creature?
I will kill Nemiroth when he's most vulnerable. During the transformation. Safeguard Sidonus until the apothecary arrives. Then join the Imperial attack.
Going alone is suicide.
Titus has made it this far, and with his resistance to the influences of the warp, plus his natural fortitude, he has a good chance of success. While he's doing that, Leandros and Mira will join the Imperial attack against the remaining heretics. It's not a complete plan, per se, but right now, it's all they've got. Titus makes his way down from the landing pad and towards the spire, helping every servant of Chaos in sight finish with all their living. Be they Traitor Guard, Chaos Marine, or Chaos Demon, they are heretics first and they will become corpses second. On approach to the bridge, Titus radios out to request transport.
Ultramarines, this is Captain Titus.
Captain Titus, Thunderhawk Lance of Jove is at your disposal, Captain.
I must reach the orbital spire. Tell your pilot to make his approach.
Yes, sir.
Upon reaching the bridge surface, the fighting is already underway. In a fortunate turn of events, a Blood Raven greets Titus at the bridge entrance, explaining that his squad, as well as a squad of Black Templars, joined the Liberation Fleet on its way to Graia, and they are very ready to purge some heretics. Titus and his backup initiate a clean sweep of the bridge, doing the God Emperor proud. And, to make it abundantly clear to the heretics that they've overstayed their welcome, some Ultramarines arrive to get in on the action. The fighting is intense, so much so that even the Blight drones that showed up only stayed intact for a few seconds before being blown out of the sky. With the bridge finally clear, the captain's ride is able to land.
Thunderhawk ready for transport, Captain Titus.
I will need all your skill, pilot.
I will take you into the Eye of Terror if you ask it, Captain.
The orbital spire will do for today, brother.
Titus emerges from the strike cruiser, jump pack equipped and Thunderhammer firmly gripped. Titus instructs Thunderhawk to return to the battlefield while he himself heads up the spire to 1v1 Nemiroth. The spire is looking a bit worse for wear, so Titus decides to help out by redecorating the interior with the corpses of the opposition. Satisfied with his interior design skills, the good captain finds the central lift and rides it to the top of the spire. Titus breaches a dense fog of chaos energy, overhearing Nemiroth in the midst of reciting foul heresy.
I return your dark relic to you. I offer up this world and all those upon it. I ask for the reward that was promised.
You want to talk to your gods? I will send you to them.
Lord Nemiroth's transformation has hardly begun, but he's being protected by a barrier, and he repeatedly summons wave after wave of demons and traitors in order to buy himself time. Even though Titus is able to ignore Nemiroth's taunting and successfully defeat the reinforcements, it was too little too late.
Killing my servants matters little. I am unassailable. The gods of chaos protect me with the very energies of creation.
You forget, Nemiroth. I am no stranger to the touch of the warp.
Titus didn't hear no bell, so he charges Nemiroth off the edge of the spire and proceeds to beat the brakes off him as the two are in freefall. Each and every strike is a swift deliverance of holy fury, and once the captain is tired of seeing Nemeroth's face, he deletes it. With Nemeroth out of the way, Titus seizes the power core and breaks it, officially bringing the conflict on Graia to a decisive end.
Look there, Ultramarine. You have saved this world.
Lieutenant Mira swooped in just in time to catch Titus before he hit the ground and brought him to safety. Titus is still reeling from his battle when a ship approaches and lands, carrying an Inquisitor accompanied by a Black Templar escort.
The damned Inquisition is here.
His injuries appear chaos inflicted. You are certain of this charge?
Captain Titus has been corrupted by chaos, Inquisitor Thrax.
I am no heretic!
You lie!
Private Leandros took it upon himself to report Captain Titus to the Inquisition, using the logic that only a servant of chaos could survive multiple attacks from chaos. That's Imperium logic for you. The Inquisitor threatens to slander Titus, extensively interrogate all Ultramarines that are under his command, and even anyone else he's come into contact with, like Lieutenant Mira, unless Titus surrenders himself to the Inquisition. Not wanting to put Lieutenant Mira or his battle brothers on the chopping block, Titus relents and leaves with the Inquisitor.
Leave my brothers and the lieutenant alone. I will come with you. I do not know why I can resist the touch of chaos, but I swear I will discover the truth.
We will discover many truths, Space Marine.
Codex Astartes leaves no room for doubt. You cannot touch the warp and emerge unscathed.
The Codex Astartes is a set of rules. They guide us, shape us as Ultramarines, teach us to hold duty and honor sacred above all. But how we live with those rules is the true test of a Space Marine. And you have failed.